Greetings, fellow humans. I'm MartianBuu, and I'm really excited to talk about the nerf reverts that were announced today. Whenever the annual rotation of standard cards to wild happens, they revert a bunch of the cards that were too strong for standard but not too strong for wild. We actually have a couple of really spicy ones this time, including some old favorites that aren't from last year. So let's go through them. First up for Demon Hunter, we have Carrier Felsil. This is going to a 6 mana 6/6 transform into a 6/6 copy of a demon in your deck. All of the 6s on this card were turned into 7s after the release of the Xylag Colossal. It gave Demon Hunter 2 Xylags and also a cheaper Xylag. It was just really effective with that, so they upped everything up by 1. So that's going back to 6s. How good is this going to be? I actually played this at 6 and Wild a little bit, and it felt all right. Hard to say if it's good enough for modern Demon Hunter, but it'll definitely be worth trying out. Then we have the final Showdown, which was recently nerfed to after you draw 6 cards in one turn, it'll reduce the cost of cards in your hand by 1. It is going back to 4 cards. People try to make the questline work in Wild all the time, and it's never quite taken. I doubt we'll notice this at all, but that's not to say that something won't pop up eventually that could use this. Next up, we have Razer Main Battle Guard, which is going to be a 2 mana 2/3 again. It was a 2 mana 2/2. The first taunt minion you play during your turn costs 2 less. This was nerfed for standard to make it a little bit easier to remove because it was too much of a high roll early on. It is probably the type of thing that will find its way into a wild deck eventually. Maybe the 1 extra health will be enough. Next up, we have the slightly controversial Dragon Bane shot. So this card was nerfed to 3 mana. It is going back to 2 mana, deal 2 damage, honorable kill, add a Dragon Bane shot to your hand. The Hunter questline was nerfed since then, so it's a bit slower, and Dragon Bane shot was never really one of the power cards of the deck in Wild. So while it did get played, and it will get played in non-odd versions of the deck moving forward, if that deck ever pops up again, it didn't make or break the deck in Wild, and maybe it'll be all right, especially considering the Hunter questline is not getting reverted. Next up, we have Kokar Pack Runner, which almost saw some play in Wild in the early versions of Beast Hunter before the Harpoon came out in Sunken City. It's good with Wound Prey and On the Hunt, all the cheap Hunter spells alongside Starving Buzzer, just like they do in Beast Hunter, to let you draw a bunch of cards while also having a bunch of rushing beasts to trade off on board. The modern day Beast Hunter in Wild is efficient enough that I wonder if this even warrants a slot. It would require a big rework to the deck, and support for Kokar Pack Runner. It has anti-synergy with Harpoon Gun, which is still one of the main reasons why Beast Hunter is relevant in Wild. You want to have as many beasts as possible, so that's always hitting something and discounting it. And if your deck is full of a bunch of spells to make Kokar Pack Runner work, your Harpoon Gun becomes less consistent. So this will be cool to play with. Is it going to be any good? I doubt it, but we'll see. Next up, we have Arcane Burst. This is the hero power on Magister Don Grass, which is the only hero that's getting a revert. I'm a little surprised and disappointed by that, but a lot of them are still at least worth considering when you build a wild deck, so I guess it's not too awful, but can't say I'm not disappointed. But this one at least is really cool. So it was buffed to deal 2 damage, gain +2 damage, honorable kill, and later nerfed to gain +1 damage on honorable kill. Hero power Mage is dancing on the line of viability in Wild, and Mage has had several of its popular decks gutted in the past year or two in Wild. So Mage in Wild getting the powerful hero card back is at least really cool. Next up, we have another Don Grass revert. So this is Arcanist Don Grass, which is the final reward of the Mage questline Sorcerer's Gambit. So for the rest of the game, you have spell damage +3. It was nerfed to spell damage +2. The Mage questline never saw meta play in Wild. There were just better things to do at the time. Are there better things to do now? I'm not sure. This actually could be really good considering the other Mage Quest support has been repeatedly hit over the past couple of years. So maybe we can consider trying this out in Wild now. Next up, we have Conviction, which is going back to 1 mana. It was nerfed to 2 because it was very consistent 12 damage on turn 5. This is the one revert where I'm a little disappointed that it's happening. Paladin has not really been relevant since the change to this card, so Paladin fans will probably be happy to see that. But this isn't the type of Paladin card I want to see play. It's just between Christology and Night of Atonement, it's way too easy to guarantee that you'll have this early on, and 12 damage for 2 mana mana is so much. This for me was the one frustrating thing about Paladin back when it was absurdly strong in Baron Stormwind. So yeah, I'm not happy to see this back, but I've been scared about cards before and they've ended up being fine, so fingers crossed. Now for a Paladin card that I am actually really excited to see come back is Level Up. This was nerfed to 6 mana because Odd Paladin was so strong in Standard at the time. Even though it's pretty slow by Wild standards, it remained nerfed for a really long time. So I thought maybe they were just not going to go back and revert any of the older cards anymore after last year, but they did actually go back and buff this. This is one of the cards that I wanted instead of Conviction. So like, if we want to make Odd Paladin relevant again, let's try Level Up first before we unnerf a super spooky Conviction. This getting reverted alongside Conviction means that this is much less likely to see play. We'll see. It could still make the cut, but Conviction is so much faster and cheaper and more flexible. It could be that we don't actually play this in Odd Paladin at all, given we can run Conviction. Still, I'm excited to try it out. This is an unnerf that I've personally really wanted for a long time, so I'm excited. And now for another slightly controversial one, we have Cold Blood, which is going back to 1 mana. It was nerfed to 2 mana a really long time ago, and now that it's rotating, it is going back to 1, which is significant for Odd Rogue. I don't think that this is going to get played in Pirate Rogue, but you never know. It is 1 mana, 4 damage. I really like this because it doesn't seem like the type of thing that we're going to play in Pirate Rogue or Kingsbane, which Pirate Rogue is already really strong, and Kingsbane is getting a bunch of other support, so it's nice that like Odd Rogue specifically is getting something that you might consider for that. Then we have Evil Miscreant. So this was nerfed a while back to be a 3 mana 1/4. It is now getting reverted to be a 3 mana 1/5. I don't know that the extra health on this is going to be enough to make the difference, but maybe with the revert to Cold Blood, this would be valuable again in Odd Rogue, which was pretty much the only place it was seeing play back when it was a more recent card. Like having something with a giant body to hold on to the 4 attack buff could be good. But before you buff it, it's a 3 mana 1/5, you know, so we'll see. It could be that the extra health is enough to tip it over, and just Odd Rogue being relevant again makes this more interesting. We'll see. Then we have Forsaken Lieutenant is going back to a 2 mana 2/2 that copies a Death Rattle. It was nerfed to 3 mana. This was nerfed for Standard Mine Rogue. Mine Rogue is kind of on the precipice of being oppressive in Wild. It's got really early kills. It's not popular for whatever reason, but the people that are playing it are doing really well and they're getting kills really early. The thing about this though is back when Mine Rogue was more popular in Wild, it wasn't played in the list anyway. So it could be that this is irrelevant, but we'll see. It's probably fine. Next up we have Garroth. So this was nerfed to shuffle only 2 bleeds into the deck, and is now going back to shuffling 3. Efficient Octobot is not getting reverted, and I say thank goodness. I know some people were excited to relive the Garroth days of playing a bunch of cards really early on and doing a bunch of burst damage. It is a very skill-intensive deck. It's just, I don't want people killing me from hand on turn 4 and 5. I'm over that. It's really hard to enjoy Wild when that's happening regularly. So for me, this is a thumbs up. I'm happy that Octobot didn't get reverted. Garroth, however, is completely fine in the absence of that, I believe. We may see this pop up in some Kingsbane lists. People were experimenting with that back before this was nerfed the first time. And Kingsbane is otherwise getting a bunch of support. So we may actually see Garroth see play, even if the deck Garroth doesn't come back because we don't have Octobot. Next up, we have Granite Forge, the card that everybody forgot about. This is going back to a 4 mana 4/5. It was nerfed by 1 health because Shaman was so strong at the beginning of United in Stormwind. And then nobody ever played it again, and will they play it now that it has an extra health? I'm not sure. Elemental Shaman hasn't received a lot of support since the Barons, so it's unlikely that the 1 extra health on Granite Forgeborn is enough to revive that. Next up we have Tame the Flames, which is stage 3 of the Shaman questline Command the Elements. It is going back to play 2 cards with Overload. It was nerfed to play 3 cards with Overload. Frog Shaman is another early combo deck that I think is approaching the line of frustration in Wild, but I'm not worried about this. So the quest line is generally bait. It's pretty much -1 card in hand. You don't need it to kill with the Frog Shaman deck, so making that a little more appealing means that more people who are trying out Frog Shaman are going to be playing the worst version of the deck, but it could be that it's not the worst version of the deck at -1 on the final reward. We'll have to see. If you liked Questline Shaman, you have this back, and it'll probably work out. Another surprising old card, we have Dark Pact going back to restoring 8 health. It was nerfed to destroy a friendly minion, restore 4 health. I am actually surprised that we got this one and not Possessed Lackey, because Possessed Lackey is a slow card that goes and gets a demon, and Dark Pact is actually really relevant in non-Cube Warlock decks. That isn't to say that I'm not excited to see this card, but it's going to be 1 mana, restore 8 health in Warlock combo decks that are trying to power through their deck really fast, which is getting another update, as we'll see in a second. So I don't think Dark Pact is going to resurrect Cube Lock. I think it's going to potentially make some Warlock combo decks a lot less weak to aggro. Regardless, I'm excited to see this card. I really enjoyed Cube Lock back in the day. Would love to have seen this come back with Possessed Lackey as well, especially considering that Big Demon Warlock is getting support in this upcoming set and core set. But realistically, I don't think it's going to get used in the places that we want it to. All right, so this is the first year that we are seeing banned cards rotate to wild. So now we're seeing what they're actually going to do, and what they did was what they said they were going to do. Release wild-friendly versions of the banned cards for wild. Stealer of Souls was nerfed to 6 mana for 6 after it was banned in wild. So this is the very first wild ban, and what they're going to do to it is fully revert it and unban it. The reason is this card was only as strong as it was in wild because of how it interacted with immune, and they're changing that. So before, if you were immune, you could cast all of your cards that cost health while you were immune without losing any life. So you get this out, you get out Violet Illusionist, and then you draw your entire deck and play Mechathune or something. But the way they're changing it now is while you're immune, if a card costs health, you still pay the health. Immune is if you're damaged now, and cards costing health no longer counts as damage, which is also relevant to the other unbanned card. So yeah, Stealer of Souls can't do what it used to do. This is the type of change that I would have liked to see at the time. I was really gunning for the, if you are immune, you can't pay health, so you can't pay the cost of the card. So similar change, just changing how it interacts with immune, I think was a great way to solve this card, and it is coming a couple of years too late, but I really support the change, and happy to have another card unbanned. Next up, we have the Demonseed, which is the only card getting nerfed as it rotates. So the Demonseed was used in a couple different archetypes back in early Stormwind and Wild that were just absurdly strong. The only thing that could really compete with it was itself and a couple of niche counters that didn't do well into other things. So super impressive card back at the time. But it was since nerfed in standard, so first stage required you do 6 to yourself, second stage required 7, third stage required 8. They nerfed it to 888. And as it's rotating now, they're nerfing it again to require 10, 10, 10. The final stage of the quest reward is going to remain unchanged. I and some other people were kind of hoping for to get a change to that, but the requirements up front are actually pretty steep now. So you have to deal 30 damage to yourself, and you can't do it with things like Sea Devil Gigafin that would cost health instead of damaging. That alone might not be enough to make me feel good about them unbanning it without changing the final reward. But so much has changed since then. So the Giants version of the deck, 2 mana Dark Lair, doesn't exist anymore. Flesh Giant is up 2 mana during that time period, which people like to say doesn't matter, but it absolutely does. It completely changes the turn that Loatheb Flesh Giant can come down on, and how many of those Flesh Giants can be played. And the OTK version of the deck got gutted. This is probably why we saw the change to Cataclysm that we did. So what they were doing before was they were using Expired Merchant to create a bunch of Hand of Gul'dans in your hand, and then Cataclysming while the final reward was out to super draw yourself into Fatigue. But Cataclysm doesn't discard your whole hand anymore, and Tome Tampering, the other hand-wide discard, is banned. So there's no way to pull that off. On top of that, Mithril Rod cost 3 back then. Now it costs 5. So it's a lot harder to draw through your deck as fast as it used to be. Overall, super happy with how they handled these unbans. I think that both of these are probably completely fine in Wild, and the Demonseed, preserving the spirit of it, will be a nice throwback. I'm actually really excited to play with this. And now for my favorite change, Fiery War Axe is going back to 2 mana after all this time. Warrior was my first several legends, and I played a ton of it all the way through War Axe getting nerfed. And Warrior just hasn't felt the same since. War Axe at 3 mana was doing nothing in the core set, so not only does rotating it to wild and unnerfing it appease nostalgists like myself, but it opens up the core set to have more interesting cards in it. So this is really exciting. Is it any good though? Probably not. I'm gonna try to make it work. I'm really excited for Fire War Axe. I've wanted this unnerf for so long and I didn't think we were ever gonna get it, so this is all really exciting. Another change I wasn't expecting is Warsong Commander. So Warsong Commander is coming back to Wild, and it is going to work as it did with Grim Patron. Whenever you summon a minion with 3 or less attack, give it charge instead of giving it rush like it was a minute ago. Will this make Grim Patron a thing in Wild? Almost certainly not. I think Grim Patron is still a bit slow, but it's going to be really cool to play with that combo again. And Warsong Commander outside of Grim Patron probably has some potential. Crab Rider exists, and being able to give more than just one thing charge means that you can play Warsong Commander and maybe with To the Front and some other cheap things like Crab Rider and get a Warrior OTK. That, coupled with the new armor tools and the new draw tools in the upcoming set, makes me think that maybe we'll have a Warrior Enrage combo deck to look forward to for this upcoming set. Again, for ancient nerfs, we have Faceless Corruptor was recently a 5 mana 4/4. They're giving it its 1 attack back. I'm not sure that there's a deck for this. We'll have to see. 5 mana, 5/8 rush over 2 bodies conditionally might be a little slow for Wild, but who knows? That is a 2 attack increase overall, and we're looking at a couple decks having some odd support back, so there could be a home for this somewhere. Then we have the revert that everybody was expecting. Goldshire Knoll is going back to 10 mana. It was 11. It was nerfed for Standard Evolve Shaman. They don't have an 11 mana card in Standard. So at 10 mana, evolving this lets you turn it into scary things like Neptulon and Thaddeus really reliably. So they put it to 11 mana so that couldn't happen anymore. That also deprived Even Warlock of the card, and this was one of the best cards in Even Warlock. It's the easiest card to discount in that deck, and in addition to being a threat, it's also a reactive tool. So it was really important to the success of Even Warlock, and that deck was already struggling given that Flurgle Toxfin still works the way it does. So getting this back will be really good for the Even Warlock enthusiasts. Next up we have Ice Revenant, which was a card that was preemptively nerfed because Frost Death Knight was coming out. So I guess in testing they felt like Ice Revenant got too big too quickly with the Death Knight cards, and so they preemptively nerfed it to +1/+1. So we don't even know how strong that would be, but now we will. So there is a Wild exclusive DK interaction that is not dependent on Gen Greymane. So it'll be cool just to have Wild DK expanded a little bit. All right, Morshan Watchpost was nerfed alongside Firewatch Post to -1 health. So this was 3 mana 3/4 after the nerf, and Firewatch Post is a 2 mana 2/3 after its nerf. They are only unnerfing Morshan Watchpost, and I think that that is fantastic. I know that a lot of people really like to play Tax Paladin. You already got the more important Tax Paladin card, Conviction. Firewatch Post is already good as a 2 mana 2/3. So making it a 2 mana 2/4 to cross the line from good to oppressive was not a good idea, and I am so happy that they did not revert that, especially considering they also reverted Conviction. Morshan Watchpost, however, was not really played in Wild at all. It didn't really have a chance, I guess, but a bit too slow for what it does. I imagine it won't see much play. All right, that covers all the reverts. I hope you're as excited as I am to play with these cards. Remember to like and subscribe for more Martian videos. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching.